Welcome to the Job Shop Show, where we talk with the owners, suppliers, partners, and customers of custom manufacturers. Listen and learn the secrets of top-performing job shops, the tools, techniques, and backgrounds that have made them successful, all in the quest of raising the bar for custom manufacturing. I'm your host, Jay Jacobs. This episode is sponsored by Paperless Parts, connecting buyers and suppliers of custom manufactured parts. The Paperless platform is a secure, ITAR-compliant, cloud-based manufacturing system for suppliers that reduces the amount of time spent on sales, estimating, quoting, administration, and order processing. It offers seamless integration with the accounting and ERP software tools that shops already use, such as QuickBooks, E2, and JobBoss. Paperless Parts was founded with a mission to make manufacturing more accessible by streamlining the quote-to-cash process. Spend less time quoting and more time selling.
Shazam! This is Jay Jacobs. Hello, and welcome to the Job Shop Show. Sometimes you have to put your money where your mouth is. After a stellar career leading and creating lots of value for a variety of diverse manufacturing companies, our guest, Rhett Ross of Leech Industries, decided to go do it for himself. He used his experience of 6 prior acquisitions to acquire Leech Industries in Meadville, Pennsylvania, which is a powerhouse region of tool and die making. Our conversation covers such things as how he looked at acquiring a company for himself, leveraging his past experience, the importance of supporting the trades to grow our workforce, why every company he was hired into used space inefficiently, and how a recent investment in marketing led to 7 figures of new business within 12 months. And for you shop owners who don't want to sell yet, but would like to winter somewhere warm, how he runs Leech from his home in Alabama. Here's Rhett. Rhett, welcome to the Job Shop Show.
Thanks, Jay. Looking forward to chatting with you today.
Yeah, you've got such a diverse background, and I love the different areas that when we did a prep phone call, all these little tendrils that come together to create a pretty interesting story. And we're going to get into the workforce and some of your ideas around that, how you came out of a more corporate world and now own a company, acquisitions, the space in shops, maybe too much space, working with OEMs. As just a smorgasbord of topics to jump into. I wanted to start, though, and get people to know you and get people to know your company. You began your career in a submarine.
Yep, I did. I started out in college thinking I was going to be a dentist, and that didn't last long. There was something about the sight of blood, even with just teeth being the issue. Didn't sit well, but I loved energy. I loved that sort of thing, and it was a different era, but I grew up kind of during the first oil shock and all that. So energy was important to me. I moved from dentistry to nuclear engineering. And from there, all my buddies were in ROTC. So I had that around me, and I just ended up talking to the Navy and ended up as a submarine officer.
How has that impacted your career, do you think? What are the lessons or things that were instilled in you in your service?
Great question. The Navy did some wonderful things. First thing is they foster leadership, and they give you the ability to be a leader, make mistakes, learn from it, and get the benefit of a lot of great natural and trained leaders. So that was one of it. One of the great early lessons I had of a leader was about how to carry yourself, how to present yourself as a leader, and it came from a chief petty officer, and a chief on a submarine, that's your more senior enlisted, and they perform a huge leadership function. But I learned a lot from that man. He was the chief machinist mate on the nuclear side of the boat. So that was one thing. The other thing was the Navy did a lot of training. They wanted you to know and understand every aspect of the boat you were on. But at the same time, they instilled that there's no level of knowledge that you can't acquire or be comfortable with. So just because you don't know something doesn't mean that you can't be impactful in that thing. And that's been a cornerstone of my career, and which has allowed me to jump. If you look at my career trajectory, I've jumped from different types of manufacturing companies. I've jumped between different technologies and really never felt that I walked in weak, because I just, was trained, taught that you can learn anything, you can be comfortable with anything, and especially if you've got a great team to rely upon.
So you took your Navy experience. Can you highlight some of those jumps and stops on your career before you got to Leech Industries?
Well, absolutely. I was a twice, and you could even say, because of the training in the Navy, thrice trained engineer. I got a bachelor's in nuclear. I got a master's in mechanical. The Navy gave me another equivalent of a master's, but it was all technical. And the funny thing was, my first job after I got out of the Navy and went back to school and then got out and did another job was actually as a salesman, technical proposal writer. And you never think of an engineer as a writer. So I moved out of the technical field directly into kind of sales, and then worked my way up to company leadership from there. But I went from nuclear to technical sales and proposal writing for fuel cell technology, which has absolutely nothing to do with nuclear engineering. Then I joined a trade group management company and actually helped do lobbying on Capitol Hill, as well as helping the nascent fuel cell industry establish a trade group and lobbying presence in DC. So again, still kind of in energy, but jumped. And then I joined a company with the mandate to revitalize their old school electrolysis industrial equipment side of its business. So heavy engineering, low volume, high mix manufacturing, um, often very customized to the installation. And then ended up taking over that business, acquiring a fuel cell business. So that was the first acquisition I was ever involved in.
Was that equipment pretty good size? It seems like that wouldn't be the type of thing you could carry around by yourself.
No, it wasn't. So we made a real small, it was kind of a lab unit, but it was still about the size of a phone booth. The big stuff we made, yeah, it would ship out in an ISO shipping container. It would take up an entire tractor trailer rig to get it to either the power plant or the metals processing, food processing plant where those things got installed.
So you probably got exposed to a lot of different manufacturing processes for the parts that were put together to make your product.
That was an interesting product. You'd almost call that side of that business a metal fabricator more than you would a CNC machine shop. We did some machining, but fairly limited. Most of the stuff we had there was welding equipment, large steel tube metal cutting equipment to lengths, 10, 12, 15-foot lengths, and that sort of thing. We only had at the time one engine lathe and one CNC mill. I remember convincing my boss to buy a water jet was the first kind of big acquisition we made to enhance that our production capability and cut our costs to produce.
Where did that lead you?
Well, that was a high tech business, and what I found in every step of my career was kind of taking things I learned as stepping stones for that. So that first little startup fuel cell company I worked for after I got my master's degree, where I was doing a lot of proposal and technical writing, really paid dividends. So when I joined Teledyne Energy, that underlying proposal writing really helped, because these were the jobs we were going after were big, what I call long sales cycles. So you'd be asked to bid on a new power plant program where we were supplying like a GE electric or something, a subset of what they were bidding to equip out a new power plant. So from that standpoint, being able to articulate and write complex proposals, develop complex pricing models, paid a lot of dividends. And then when I took over that business, the other half of that business was the manufacture of a very custom thermoelectric solid state power conversion device. And that's where, I got into sintered metals, the chemistry of semiconductor materials and that sort of thing. And production of very specialized batches in small lab style production environments. That took that proposal writing even further. How do you grow a business? And that was a business that had stagnated for probably 20 years as a little 10, $15 million business. And I looked at that and went, that's stagnation. You can't stay there. How do we grow this business? And that's where we looked at our products and said we can make these additional products to tackle these adjacent industry sectors on the commercial side using our electrolysis and the fuel cell tech we bought. And then on the thermoelectric side, which was largely military focused or space focused. So one of the products we made, large proposal we won, is now driving around Mars. It's the power system for the Mars Science Lander. And so there, how do you take that program and bid that to the government and join a very substantial space program? So how do you look at all that? So that proposal writing, that entrepreneurial spirit, and that first startup I joined all contributed to that point in time.
You created a lot of value for the shareholders of Teledyne, and it's sort of nice that it was a small company within a really big company, so you had resources, and you also had some, after that, C-level roles in some other public companies. And what came out of those that you would say make who you are today and enabled you to go out and become the owner of a private manufacturing company?
Everything again is a stepping stone, and it's all about relationships. And that's one of the great things about being in business is you meet a lot of great people, not just employees, but other companies, experts, consultants, bankers, financiers, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So it's a great thing to do and get exposure. At each step of that taught me how do you buy a business, because we did a number of acquisitions over the years, and I was privy as part of a public company. I'd get briefed on other acquisitions, and you could ask questions. And why'd you do this? Why'd you pick this one, not that one? How did you develop your financing model? Or how did you decide what to pay for it? So all those things were very helpful. And then the ability to go interact with a diverse group of people globally. I've done business in India, China, the Middle East, Europe, Asia. The only place I haven't gone is South America, or done substantial business in South America. But you learn to really appreciate all other cultures and their approach to business. You learn a lot about negotiation. Negotiating in China is different than negotiating in the Middle East, is different than negotiating in Europe. And it can be a lot of fun. Kind of one of the greatest bits of fun I had was being taken to a market in China and watching my host negotiate to buy a suitcase. It was just fun to stand on the sideline and watch all of this go on. But you really get a sense of kind of win-win versus win-lose, lose-win approaches. And it's a lot of experience. But yeah, it all helped. Getting experience across different manufacturing environments was fun. Highly engineered products that you make one of in 5 years and then fly it to Mars, versus making custom variants of the same thing, but still in the volumes of 5 to 10 a year, but they're multi-million-dollar widgets that you sell, all the way up to high volume manufacturing of engines. That kind of experience is also pretty cool. And then seeing how the supply chains work is very beneficial, and the different types of supply chains.
I want to transition to Leech Industries. However, I was thinking about your Navy service and being on a sub, and the guys and women on subs are known for taking really short showers. Do you still take really short showers? And tell the audience how many seconds you get on a sub to take a shower.
Oh, well, it's not seconds to take a shower on a sub, because you're making your own water. And so
Yeah.
it's, water goes first to the reactor, second to the steam plant, third to food cooking, fourth to clothes washing, and fifth to showers. So when you look at that, there's not a lot of water. So the way you take a shower is you get in, you turn the water on and you get wet. And you're probably 10, 15, 20 seconds just getting wet. You turn the water off, you suds up and you get yourself washed. You turn the water back on and you rinse that off in another 15 to 20 seconds and you're done. That's your shower. So I can still do that today, but I take very long showers today.
Reminds me of a former Navy SEAL who I know, and you hear about the buds training, and he
Yeah.
was in a lot of cold water. And I was talking to him about cold plunging, and he just looked at me. He said, I never want to do that again in my life.
Yeah.
Yep.
I don't blame him. Once you've done it, you just kind of move on from it. And,
Yeah.
it's funny, but I was stationed briefly near Coronado Island. So seeing them out there in the Pacific Ocean is cold. So I get it.
Give us the elevator pitch on Leech Industries.
So Leech Industries is a diverse contract manufacturer that has both a high precision CNC side of the business for low volume, high mix stuff in aerospace defense, and a commodity side of the business for that high volume production in the industrial commodity sector.
What sort of manufacturing services specifically do you offer?
So we offer high precision multi-axis machining on our precision side. That's actually a specialty of ours, with a capability and a skill set to do the hard metals. So we do a lot of Inconel, a lot of titanium, a lot of beryllium copper, the stuff that a lot of people don't like to mess with. And then on the commodity side, we are a very effective manufacturer of plastic injection molded parts, both thermoset and thermoplastic. We do complex progressive metal stamping, and we do zinc die casting.
And can you give me a sense of the scale of the company and where you're located?
We're located in Meadville, Pennsylvania, so the original tool and die capital of the world, and it's still very much that way. A lot of tool and die shops, some great skilled people in that area, and a beautiful area as well up in the northeastern corner of Pennsylvania. The scale, we're in the 12 to $15 million revenue range, and with targets to go higher and the customer base to go higher.
Let's connect the dots now. You did not start the company. You were working in C-level roles at public companies. How did you transition to becoming the owner of Leech Industries? What drove you to want to make such well, I'll put it this way. You could have, in a sense, sailed off into the sunset and said, I'll go into consulting, part-time, play a lot of golf, whatever your interests are. And instead, you decided to take on the challenge of owning a manufacturing company, a job shop. And that takes a lot of courage. What was behind all that? How did that happen?
Sheer insanity. No, in all seriousness, I've made a career of delivering value for shareholders. When I worked for Teledyne, I did more than right by them, and they did right by me. And then when we sold Continental Aerospace to AVIC in China, and I stayed with them, I did right by them, and they did right by me. So, but I always looked at manufacturing. It's always been an intriguing industry. I mean, you make stuff. It is so cool. It's so fun to be able to walk out and look and go, that was a piece of forged metal, and now it's a finished crankshaft for an aircraft engine. Or, gee, look at this. This was a chunk of plate steel, and now it's the end plates for a megawatt scale electrolyzer to produce industrial hydrogen and oxygen gas. And you look at that, and it's just so cool. And to be able to say, I launched something into space. I was part of a program that's got something driving around Mars. Those are those little things you look at and say, wow, this is just so cool. And I looked at manufacturing in North America and I'm like, this is an industry that builds livelihoods, it builds careers. You know, you can be a machinist, you can be a tradesman in manufacturing and have a very good life and deliver a very good life for your family and your community. And I'm like, I want to see more of this. And so when I looked at that and I hit a point where I said, you know, I'm okay. I can go off and right into the sunset, as you said, but I'm a high energy person. Golf is fun, but doesn't intrigue me that I'd be playing it 7 days a week and all the other stuff. And so I'm like, I want to stay involved. I've got a lot of runway in front of me. I want to see manufacturing grow in North America. I see reasons why it needs to come back. I met some like-minded people, and when I said I'm going to go into retirement and manage my family money, and they said, well, let's talk. And so started down that path. And the idea of finding a manufacturing company was not just to own and run a small company and keep me busy for the next decade. It was to start to build a platform, to build an opportunity to grow manufacturing in North America. And so that was what galvanized me to do that. And I said, I want to create value for myself. I've done all right, but I want to create value. I want to feel that thrill that it was my value and more of my legacy than I was a footnote in a couple of shareholder reports in an annual book. So that's kind of the thought process.
Did you leave your role before you started looking, or was that in parallel? I want to talk about, I guess, the acquisition process because you made acquisitions in your different jobs throughout your career. Let's talk about that. You decided to acquire a manufacturer, and then how did you go about that?
I'd be curious to hear how, when you talk to others about this, what they thought. It's an interesting environment out there. When you talk to people, why do you do something like this? You know, why do you move from being an electrician to owning your own electrician crew, or you know, why do you move from being a machinist to, you know, going and buying your own machine and starting, you know, hanging your shingle out? It's always interesting to me why people do this, and so I'd love to hear your take from others you've talked to. But with respect to me, no, I started thinking about it a couple of years before I retired. I mean, I'd looked at it for years. And actually, I and a couple of friends had talked about it seriously back around 2006. And it just turned out to not be the right time. So I kept just thinking about it. You know, it's a case of what do you do? And like I said, I had some family money to manage, and then some others approached me as well. So what I'm going to say is it was organic. I knew I was going to go out and create value for myself. When I retired, you know, I'd always looked at buying a business. When I retired, I took some time off. I reflected. Somebody approached me to help them with a drone delivery concept, and I stepped in and helped that for a while, which was where I learned that partner choice is an important thing. So didn't fully sink the lesson, but I've learned it fully now. But you know, it was a case of what do I do? I did some consulting. I helped a team look at a company that was having some difficulties in the contract manufacturing space, and you know, delivered that as a positive result. And all of it convinced me that owning your own company, being in control of your own fate, living both the trials and tribulations of it is really where I wanted to be. And so from there, we laid out a plan, laid out a financing structure, partnership structure, and then we went out and looked. And there it's just establishing, using the known contacts you have to see what might be out there, as well as just, you know, scouring the internet, scouring the want ads, so to speak, and looking for opportunities.
Before we get to that part of it, you mentioned a couple critical things, a partnership structure, and then you said you learned on partner choice. Can you talk about the partner structure and why you did it a certain way? And then maybe things that you've learned that you have rules now for partner selection?
The first thing was you tend to look at your partners as people you know, people with similar thought processes and complementary skill sets. And in two different cases, that's exactly where it came. My common partner was a gentleman that I met who got involved when I was helping Continental Aerospace recapitalize and build a new modern factory. Um, and he was more heavily in real estate. And by virtue of talking to him over the years, we had that common feel for manufacturing and business in North America and business in Alabama. And so that set up a structure, and we both had common beliefs in accountability. We had common beliefs in, you know, planning and organization. And so a nice link there. But when we started down the path of a true hardcore technology start, which is always a hard scrabble business, and we had a third partner that my partner, and I'm not going to use names on any of this, but
Sure.
my partner had been introduced to a very successful venture capitalist. If I mentioned his name, you know him, you know his history, and a brilliant guy. I mean, he's an absolute genius, but neither of us really understood the dynamic. And this gentleman, by virtue of his success and his money, very much wanted to be in control, had a very set expectation for what was going to happen in a very highly regulated market sector where you were going to have to not break rules, but you were going to have to break the institutional barriers to applying this new drone technology to something that's absolutely going to happen. And Amazon's starting their first trials now, which is drone delivery of packages directly to your doorstep, last mile delivery. And so, but what happened there was a great early relationship, but as money raised became much and much more important, and keeping the pace of technology going and doing a lot of the stuff and hiring people, we got into a game of really, he was funneling stuff to chosen sources that didn't make sense to the rest of us. He had set up a structure where he had total control and wasn't afraid to use it. And so, opinions started getting less valued, expertise was denied, and it just was kind of a souring thing. And there wasn't equality in the skill sets brought to the table. And that's very important, I think, especially in startups. There's that trust that you've got to have. So coming out of that experience, what did I learn? Okay, we need to have a better partnership agreement. We need to really hash out the social issues. You need to understand what you're getting into. You need to have off-ramp things defined in case, and you really need to talk through kind of the what ifs. Well, what if money becomes tight? What do we do? What if we have an accident? Delivering drone packages is, we're in the Wild West right now. So what happens if an accident occurs? How do we prevent accidents? All of this kind of stuff that is scary. And you go, oh, well, we'll deal with it when it happens. But what I learned was when you deal with it when it happens, it's still scary. And if somebody has control and you can't have the discussion and they don't want to listen, it's very unfortunate. So walking into Leech Industries, we tried to get ahead of all. We vetted ourselves better. We tried to have much tougher social discussions. We tried to look at what happens if, all of those same questions, but being much more in front of them. And I think we did a much better job at it. But the one thing I learned about here was risk tolerance is also an important thing. And not everybody might be wired for a level of risk, and not everybody might be wired for the uncertainty of day-to-day business ownership. And you mentioned it earlier, when you're working for a big company and you have problems, there's a full support infrastructure there. You've got cash lines of credit. You've got legal experts, you've got technical experts, you've got HR experts, you've got all of these people that you can fall back on to help or at least give
Yep.
advice. When it's your own business, that fallback, when you look behind you, you're kind of going, oh, wait a minute, I'm that person behind me. So there's a level of scariness that goes, and if you're not wired for that, so looking at that is really important. And it goes back to that old saying, never risk more than you can afford to lose. And that's very true. So, as I go forward, I think partners are an important aspect of anything. You can't do everything by yourself. So I would still look for that. I value my current partner a lot. And I think that having that there and a great team behind you are going to be important, but maybe different financing structures, more pref, more non-operating partner structures may be better, which is where you start to get into that private equity much more so than you do in kind of.
Can you dig into more of what you just said about the financial aspect of the partnership? Are you thinking about incentivizing a potential partner in a different way, or how money is contributed to the purchase of the business, or how it is taken out of the business? Where are you going with that?
All of the above. Just start with when you think about how do you finance, so you can look at it and go, you have enough cash that you can just buy it and forego everybody else, which
Mhm.
is not really what anybody does. So you start thinking about leverage, and then you look at what are the types of leverage. And so you can bring forth equity that is your own money. You can bring forth equity that you've brought other partners in, non-operating partners. So you give it the case of, okay, we need, let's just take a round number. We need $1 million of equity. So we'll go raise that from a group of qualified people, and they will get either shares in the company and some sort of waterfall partnership structure, or they'll get actual equity. Then you have to define what are the roles if they get actual equity, operating and decision making roles. And a lot of people don't want that. So
Mhm.
you stick with it there. And then you also go to banks, you go to now non-bank lenders. A lot of large private equity firms are doing lending themselves as another way to do this. So there are a lot of different paths you go there, but relative to partners, you're dealing with, okay, there's an upfront equity infusion, you become X% partner. If there's a draw, you have to commit to that draw, otherwise you dilute, but
Mhm.
dilution has its own things. And so laying all of that out is, I think, really
When
front.
when you say draw, to be clear, you're talking about if extra cash is needed to be injected into the business for maybe unforeseen conditions that cause an operating loss, something along those lines, or potentially you want to expand, and the expansion or acquisition of maybe another company would require additional money. So when you say draw, it's first you're looking to the partners to equally contribute for their ownership stake.
Correct. Yeah. And I wouldn't go first to a negative. I mean, there are a lot of reasons to do a draw, which, and you highlighted one of the biggest ones is investment for growth, whether that's buying a new piece of equipment or an acquisition. And when you look at that, I mean, your ideal would be to fund it out of company operations, but where I've seen in some companies is they're growing at such gangbusters that, your cash flow is going into working capital growth and all the other stuff that ties to that. And so those equipment investments, yeah, you may have some timing draws. The other aspect is you may have timed your draws. So you may have said, okay, we need X dollars in the fund now to go conduct the search and do X. We'll need our next draw in 9 months, and people's conditions
So
change. So you've got all of these things, but when I look at it, yeah, draw is money to do something.
Jump into the Leech acquisition. Well, first, tell me a story about a company you looked at that you decided not to purchase and why.
Well, I looked at quite a number of companies, looked at a really interesting one. And again, it's a very specific one, actually had a product, an engineered product. So that was intriguing. And it's a regularly produced engineering product. When we went and looked at it, they were in it's one of those things you look for. It was a niche market, which is very positive. It was a high barrier to entry market because it was a regulated aerospace market. It was a certified product, meaning that in order to be on the airplane, it has to be certified by the
Mhm.
FAA. So, you look at all that and go, okay, on paper, this looks really great. Went in and when we looked at it, it presented very well, solid manufacturing capability using modern manufacturing, including some 3D printing stuff, which for the product made a lot of sense. And it was a reasonably sized market, not huge, but reasonably sized. The problem was, and this is why we pretty much walked away, they were probably number three in the segment, which in and of itself is not bad, but they were, when you went and looked at it, number one was big, captured the majority of the business, um, had a lot of funds. It was a diverse business, so it sold this product not just in aerospace, but into several other sectors. So it had a lot of cash that it could use to invest and stay ahead, and also to compete very effectively for the big jobs. Number two was dramatically smaller, but still economy of scale made them. And then this was number three. And so when you looked at it, you kind of looked at this business and said, wow, it's a great business. It's in there. It's got good premium customers. It's got the right customers. Um, but at the same time, you could see very, very constrained on growth. And in order to change that dynamic, you would have had to sink tons and tons of money. Otherwise, it was kind of, it's doing this and probably it's always going to do this. So not a lot of upside. So that was why we walked from that, even though it had one of those great things, which was a product.
And then what attracted you to Leech Industries and how was it structured so you wanted to acquire it?
What attracted us was a couple of things. It was more diverse than your typical contract manufacturer, number one. So it had both the precision machining capability as well as that commodity business. So that was number one, a little bit more diversification in that contract manufacturing space so we could see multiple paths for growth. Number two, unlike a lot of players in this sector, it actually had a very diverse customer base.
Okay.
So its largest customer only captured maybe 25% of the total business, where in some companies that could be 50 to 75%.
Sure.
So you're much more beholden. And it had a number of customers that were north of 10% of revenue volume. Um, and then finally, it had attached real estate, which, because of my partner's skill sets in the real estate sector, gave us some options in how we financed and acquired the business.
How can you use the real estate to make the buying the business easier?
It's an asset that you have to buy if you're going to do it, but because of our real estate knowledge and depending upon how you do it, we were able to leverage that on we flipped the real estate and it helped offset the acquisition cost of the core business. Now, that's not going to be something you can do every time. It was both a combination of the total package of the business being at the right price
Hmm.
and my partner's skill set in real estate that we were able to then leverage that on a very effective flip.
Did you have the buyer for the real estate lined up before you bought the business?
No.
So you assume, though, you would be able to do that and had high confidence.
Yes, it was part of our due diligent analysis and part of our factor in what we were doing. And again, that's the advantage of the partnership we have and the knowledge in the trade space.
Is your partner physically at the business every day?
No, neither of us are.
Right. So you're in Alabama, the business is in Pennsylvania. How does that work? What gave you the confidence of buying a company that's quite a distance away and being sure it was gonna run the way you wanted it to?
Well, I don't know that we were sure it would run the way we wanted it to from day zero. I did go up and embed for a while, and that's part of the model. I think for your listeners, when we talk about this, there's really kind of two ways you can look at this. I'm going to buy a business because it's always safer to buy a business that's already operating and has a track record than it is to try and start it up myself. Yes, I'm going to pay maybe a little bit more. I'm going to have to stretch a little bit harder, but I trade that risk off versus the risk of a startup. And then you're saying, I want to run that business. So I can see certain people who've grown up in whatever business sector you want and saying, well, I want to do this on my own now. I want to be the master of my own fate. And so they go buy that business to be an operator and run it and grow it for the next 10, 20, 30 years. The other model is really, I'm buying a business as an investment. And I want to establish that business to achieve objectives A, B, or C. And yes, I'm going to need to have professional management and set expectations and be a little bit more corporately focused, I guess, for lack of a better term. Where I was always going was that second model. I wasn't looking to go run a $200 million business and now run a 15. I was looking to establish a platform against which to start to drive a business towards those bigger numbers.
So the people who are the leaders managing the business day to day in Pennsylvania, are those people you brought in and had selected before, you just didn't know where they would be? Or were they people that you brought in outside the company after you had been there a little while yourself and figured out what you needed for an operating structure? Or are they people who came with the business?
When it started out, we brought a general manager with us. So we had identified somebody that we had confidence in, had prior experience with, and a great deal of trust in to come in and lead the team. When we evaluated the business, it was one of the things that we looked at was, is there a leadership team there that could grow with what we want to do? And we started out down that path. We felt that there definitely was. Otherwise, it would have raised the risk profile of the company. We just felt they needed that senior leader to help them grow into a much more growth oriented role. Initially, that was successful, and we felt pretty good about that. But the one thing, and I've acquired several multi generational family owned businesses, and the one trend you have there, which I think is a shame, and it goes to the owner work-life balance. But again, what makes an owner in these smaller businesses unique is that they grow and develop these companies. But quite often they do it on their own, and their level of trust only goes so far. And so you tend to see your middle management in these smaller companies very limited in their own potential. We found that ultimately to be true. So we ended up having to change out some of that middle management. Now, the funny thing was, or the great thing was other people that were there have stepped into some great leadership roles and are growing well with the company. So it's just, selecting and doing that. But ideally, if the business being acquired doesn't have a solid professional leadership team, it would be the intent to bring a team in that we usually have within our Rolodex.
And assume they weren't in the Meadville, Pennsylvania area, so that you had identified people who would relocate for you.
Correct. Yeah.
And are they equity partners with you, or Is it, how are you incentivizing them for success?
Well, normally what we would do and is we would set up a small earned equity component
Hmm.
that they would get so that they're incentivized to help us achieve the objectives of growth and other
Sure.
things there. And then they benefit from that relationship.
The challenges that are universal across shops are workforce. And I know that you have that commitment to helping America regain its manufacturing foothold. Have you seen those challenges at Leech in your own company?
Yeah, I've seen that become an increasing problem over the last couple of decades. And it's a shame. We are facing that problem at Leach. Finding qualified machinists, finding qualified injection molding machine operators, zinc diecast operators is proving very difficult. And these are skill sets that can be trained for, learned, and offer great careers. So, even when we acquired Leach, they had a very good, which I was very pleased to see, apprentice program. And we've worked to maintain that. They had 3 apprentices in the program when we started in the tool and die section. We added several others in the CNC section and are working to continue to grow that and have graduated a number of them. So it's nice. A lot of what I've been working to do, and I'm even trying to do it with my youngest son, is help people understand that the trades afford a great opportunity. And by trades, I mean being a CNC machinist, being a plastic injection molding operator, being an electrician, being a plumber. When you look at what you can make straight out of high school and the type of career arc potential that you have, again, it can be a very nice, fulfilling life when you look at it. And it's not quite like, you know, our father's generation of manufacturing. There is a lot of technology. I mean, a CNC machinist is a programmer first and foremost now.
Yeah.
And I don't think a lot of kids know that when they start to see that. We've been hosting at Leach, industry days for the local high school and the local co-op. And my HR person told me she was just at a meeting where a couple of kids were there with their parents, and we had a little bit of a table at one of the chamber meetings or something. And the kids came, yeah, we visited this company and it was so exciting. Did you know I could not go to college and do this, and I could start making this kind of money, and they'll train me. And
Yeah.
see that message getting out is so awesome because it is a great career. I mean, these are kids that 2 years out of school can be making north of $20 an hour, not counting overtime, and zero debt. You only get better from there.
We did a lot of that at Rapid, and it takes time, it takes effort, it's got to be consistent. However, you can sit back and complain about it, or you can actually do things yourself. And you mentioned that there's a lot of manufacturing in that area of Pennsylvania. If every company is doing a little bit, the word gets out, they're hit from all different angles about how wonderful a career in trades is. And I would encourage shop owners who are listening, ask yourself, that's going to be my question at the end, I guess, what are you doing to incentivize to bring the trades back? So I want to hit you up with some rapid fire type questions, Rhett, and see if we can get some juicy nuggets for listeners. One of the things is you are working with a lot of large OEM customers, and you were a large OEM customer at different points. What are some of the challenges and the ways you can get around the challenges of working with the OEMs as a shop?
The number one challenge is their forecasts. If you're doing repeat work for them against a forecast, um, their forecasts change almost daily and don't seem to always make a lot of sense. So really, number one is understanding how that forecast works and how you sometimes have to maybe take a few days before you suddenly gyrate your shop, because you might find out that the forecast that went from 100 to 0 will be back at 100 before the week's out. So how to manage the forecast, number one.
And
Number
how do
two,
you how
I'm
do you
sorry.
do that? How do
Well,
you do
part
that?
of it is exactly that. Take a breath. Don't panic. Number one. Number two is know your contract rights. So quite often, the OEM can't turn you off. So, you think about it as a manufacturer. I'm 4 weeks into an 8-week production and you just told me you want to take none of these? No, that's not the way it works. But you have to be timely. So know your contract language, because you probably have the right to force them to take it. Now, I'd rather force them to take it. They're not going to walk away from you because you do it. They're hoping you don't do it, but they're not going to hold it against you if you do. Think about that. I'd rather get that WIP converted to cash, knowing that I'm going to have a gap of 6 months before I produce that again, maybe, than the other way around of going, I'm sitting on that WIP for 6 months because I
Yeah.
gave them the opening. So it's really know your contract, hold them accountable, and also realize that their forecast. I mean, I can't tell you how frequently we have several of our customers go, I need these on my schedule. Oh, no, I need these, push them out. And then suddenly they're paying me to expedite them and overnight freight them, all in a window of 2 weeks. It's
Yeah.
unbelievable.
Yeah.
So that's number one. Number two, don't let any OEM take advantage of you on their payables. Too many, and I've seen this, and I mean, even big companies fall foul of this. Don't let them not pay you on time. It's just as simple as that. The day they're late, you're on the phone to them. You're sending them emails. And it's amazing to me how many of them will lose an invoice, or, it didn't get received on time and therefore I can't pay you on time. No, there's nothing in the contract that says receiving is an impediment to payment. But they'll all string you out, especially right now. As soon as interest rates started climbing, we saw payments start slowing down.
We
So
used to call before it was due and make sure that they got the invoice and they quote didn't lose it. And yeah, we were having those conversations well ahead of the due date. And I think our payables, we had it down to 35 days.
yeah,
You can manage it, but it's not fun. It's a pain in the ass. However, cash is king in a business.
yeah.
The amount of space that a shop or a factory needs. Talk about space, and you've been in a lot of companies, made a lot of acquisitions. What have you seen?
Just about every company I've ever seen has too much space. I get it. You're an automotive manufacturer and you're going to build a plant and you're going to grow at X rate every year. So you might create that extra factory floor space to add in stuff. Those rarely pan out. But every company I've been in, every company I've acquired, when you get in there, they have too much space. The first company I took over, it just still cracks me up to this day. They had 25,000 square feet was their office, their manufacturing area, their inventory area, and then they had another 25,000 square feet where they were storing all the stuff they didn't want to get rid of. And you just look at that and you go, okay, and you walk in there and you're going, like, you're taking your finger and brushing it across the top of boxes, and you're inch deep. And I'm not exaggerating. And you go, okay, we're going to back up the trucks where all the scrap metal's going to the scrap, all the paper's going into the shredded truck, and then we're canceling our lease. When you have too much space, it creates so much waste. You are amazed at how many footsteps become waste. I don't have any room, so I'm going to put this operation over there 50 feet away. So now I'm walking back and forth 5 times. That's all waste. I've got all this stuff in front. I need that piece of material. Oh, it's all the way in the back of this other junk that I put in front of it. So I got to move all that out of the way. It's waste. So a big thing for me, and it's something we did at Leech. They had the same thing. We have The tool room, the grind and jig grind and all that was in one building, the CNC shops in another, common manager, materials moving back and forth, managers walking back and forth. It's 10 minutes minimum each way, plus all the other lost time of moving back and forth. Collapse those together. Lots of stuff like that, all to take waste out of the business, not so that we can get rid of people, but so that we can free up people to take on growth.
Last one, marketing. Why have you invested in it?
Because if you don't, you can't grow. And we can look at it and say, and I'll go back to that, why do you pass on a company that has 50, 60, 70% of their business with one customer? If that one customer is off, you can't recover from that. That's just huge. So, you have to be able to go get other customers. Growing one customer substantially is great. And that doesn't mean that you don't want to grow your business with each customer you have, but you've got to go get other customers and they have to be able to find you. And, in the old days, it used to be the Thomas Register, the old green books, was how you looked for manufacturing sources. And nowadays it's the internet, it's LinkedIn, it's social media, it's just the Google search. And where do you appear in the Google search? So we've spent the last year at Leech Industries learning how to, all about search engine optimization, retooling our website. We've started an entire social media campaign. And what's happened because of that? We've added 6 new customers in 2024, totally new customers that found us because of a web search or found us because of a social media presence. And one of those customers, their first order put them in our top 10 customers. So it wasn't a trivial order. We took our marketing and we lived our marketing. So we didn't market stuff that we don't practice and preach. And by that, I mean, this customer found us because we were putting a lot of emphasis on injection molding. But when they came to us, they had a complex challenge and they needed to bring back into production a wiring assembly that had been out of production for over a decade. And their prior attempt to bring it back into production failed. So when they came to us, they said, well, can you make this? And we said, sure, but what's it for? And they said, this, and this, and here are the problems we're having. And we're like, well, you know what? We do injection molding, we do stamping, we do machining, and we do custom assembly. And they're like, you do? Yeah. And we're looking at your problem, and here's how we would approach this. And they were like, holy cow, we need to come see you. They came and saw us. We worked through this. It's what I call long cycle sales. It took 6+ months with them to really work through the process, convince them that they wanted to do. And then they placed a $750,000 order for tooling, and they're getting ready to place a $750,000 order for production. And that's big. The other 5 customers have come in for the same reasons. They found us. We provided, a partnered solution to what they needed. And each of them have come in at 5 to 6 digit order numbers in the first year of partnership. So you've got to market to get new customers.
So you're saying marketing pays.
Yes.
This has been great, Rhett. Hit a lot of different areas, and I love that you have decided to not retire and to actually really jump into, the American manufacturing renaissance and revival. Anything we didn't cover you want to put out there?
We didn't cover it, but I think being a business owner is not for everybody. That's a fact. But nobody should be afraid of being a business owner. There are a lot of rewards. You meet great people, you work with great people, your teams are always great. And it's just very rewarding. So I think it's an area that everybody should consider. And You don't need to have gone to college. You don't need to have tons and tons of business experience in order to embark down this path. The keys to me are always ask questions, always be open, and go find a great mentor. There are a lot of people out there that are great resources to help people grow. And even with my experience and where we are with Leech Industries, we went and found the most successful retired business owner in the Meadville area to become a mentor and advisor for our leadership team at Leech.
I love that's a great final nugget. So we'll end it there. If people want to get in touch with you, what's the best way?
They can find me on LinkedIn, Rhett Ross. They can reach out to me at the Bay Point Group LLC website, www.thebaypointgroup.com. And any of those will get to me, or they can reach out to Leech Industries, and I return calls from there as well.
Thank you for your time. Thank you for sharing your wisdom. And again, a lot of fun takeaways. And I already tipped the hat on my ask for the audience. However, it's so true. And there is so much opportunity right now for the trades. I would encourage you to do your small part in your community, have an open house, reach out to a high school, reach out to a community college, somehow make a difference and create awareness in these young adults that there is a huge opportunity to make a great living for themselves and have a job where you actually want to go to work. So until next time, keep those lasers cutting and those spindles turning. Have a super day.
Thanks for listening to the Job Shop Show podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, please be sure to subscribe so future episodes are automatically downloaded directly to your device. You can also leave an honest rating and review on Apple Podcasts. Not only do I read every single one, it also helps me understand what content matters most to you. Thanks again for listening to the Job Shop Show.